Alright, time for another draftphysics.com video presentation and such. Debate physics also, but again, the debate is not in the proper form where I make an argument and then they make a counter argument, so I can't get them to do that. So I made a bunch of 5-minute videos that are on the debatephysics.com website, and none of these players, these opposers, these snarky people will actually dissect those arguments and point out the flaws or the poor reasoning or the inconsistency with some sort of decent experimental data or facts. Alright, so the current controversy was over something really kind of simple. Leibniz, the guy who originated the whole theory of 1/2 mv squared, the idea that there's a squared function that is conserved, that so you drop a 4 mass, okay, and a 1 mass from 4 times the distance. Alright, and the simple truth is that we know how fast this will be going. Okay, the 1 mass will hit the ground with a 2 velocity, not a 4 velocity, just a 2. And the 4 mass will be hitting the ground with a 1 velocity, so these are just multiplications, and clearly the momentum doesn't match. Now if I use a 2 mass, then it'll be 2 times 2, okay, which will equal 4, so there's an equivalency. Now what they do is they decide to say, well look, I can put it on a lever, and guess what, we could put anything on a lever. I could put a 1/2 mass, I could put a 1/4 mass, I could put 1 ounce on a lever. And as long as I came up with the appropriate velocity at the appropriate distance, that is a gigantic velocity, okay, compared to a small velocity, I can put almost anything on pulleys or a lever and say they equal each other. When in fact they do, just because you've created the right momentum. But that momentum won't be the same. This is not 4 times the velocity here. Okay, now I can put it on a lever and make it go 4 times as fast, and then they'll equal each other because the momentums will be the same. That's the irony. It's when the momentums are equal that you have the right answer, not when the kinetic energies match. So clearly the momentums don't match. Now it's another question about weight and how things acquire weight and what weight is. Now I've made an example that weight is just a compression of a spring. Okay, that's all you do when you're weighing something, is compressing a spring, and you can just push anything with a velocity into a scale and essentially measure its weight. So if you push something at 1 mile per hour, now do they disagree that this is the truth? Do they have some evidence it's not the truth? That I could push anything at 1 mile an hour into a spring and it will weigh its mass? That in fact gravity is basically doing that. It's pushing you into the ground at 1 mile an hour, essentially, effectively. Let's just say the effective impact is you moving 1 mile an hour into the ground, and that's the effective impact of creating your weight on the ground. And it sort of makes sense when you think about it. Frankly, 9.8 meters per second is 22 miles per hour. You can just dissect, the 4.9 meters into a bunch of distances, and you can figure out that yes, that sort of makes sense. And so basically it's a 1 centimeter fall in gravity, okay, equals that 1 mile per hour. So it's like falling 1 centimeter when you're just sitting on the surface. That's an argument. Now you could tell me that some part of this argument you know it's wrong, and you know it for a reason, because there's some piece of evidence somewhere that proves it wrong. So show me the piece of evidence that proves it wrong. That's your obligation, but they won't fulfill that obligation. So then we went to, we have other arguments, the Charolais clay experiments. I went over and over this one, and the major player defending it won't even watch the video, so he won't come close to ever countering the argument. But the argument's rather simple. See, if you just dent a surface with a shaped object, then you're going to take advantage of the fact that if you dent it very little and you dent it more somewhere else, that what you've changed is this one, because it's hit mostly the flat surface, not the sideways surface, that this had to push the clay down and then it had to push it sideways. Where this one, yeah, it had to push some clay down and some clay sideways, but this whole portion here, you could argue, it just pushed sideways. So it had an advantage. It was easier, okay, to displace the clay. The further you could get into the clay, the more you're displacing it sideways. So it's an advantage, okay, to have a little more energy. Will give you what will appear like more energy. So half will look like twice as much as half, as much, because of this advantage of going further into the clay and taking advantage of the fact. Now once you go past the halfway point, then the two things would be equal, because then they've pushed the same amount down and the same amount sideways. And now they'll be doing the same exact thing as they go further and further through the clay. They'll be pushing exactly the same amount of clay, the same amount of an equal amount of sideways and down. All right. So it's a simple enough argument that that's not going to get you the real, it's not going to tell you the truth. All right. A simple test for an experiment I just discovered, sort of, was that, yes, if you want to find out whether your clay is measuring correctly, one way to do it is to hit it with the same weight repeatedly and see if it measures consistently. So when you hit it with 10 pounds, and then you hit it with 10 pounds again, you hit it with 10 pounds again, does it compress evenly no matter how compressed it gets? So I've done a couple of preliminary tests smushing clay, and the first problem I found was that that doesn't really, you can put a pedestal of clay, and what happens to it if you don't have some kind of stability is that, yeah, so it starts to go sideways. It starts to do all kinds of, the top goes crooked, like, it has a slope to it. It does all kinds of things that aren't regular, and means the measurements aren't going to be very specific. So I've thought that maybe what I'll do is extrude clay in an effort to do a little better by putting a hole in a cylinder and then, pushing the clay in the cylinder and pushing clay out of some consistent opening, and that way just measure how much clay is pushed out and see if that stays consistent. No matter how many times I hit it or how I hit it, it always comes out, consistent. All right, that's for another day. All right, so and then this other experiment is just so simple in terms of, the paradox it creates. And I shouldn't have to argue this stuff over and over. There should be somebody willing to make a counter argument and explain how it's possible, how it's theoretically makes sense to them. All right, so I have two objects, a 3 mass and a 1 mass, and they're just pendulums. And so I swing one in with, let's say, just 100 momentums, a mass and a velocity of 100. And what happens, I'm supposed to believe, okay, is that the 3 pops out over here with 150 momentum, and that the 1 mass pops back this way with 50. Indicating in some respect that they didn't really split the 100, but that's sort of the implication in some way, but it doesn't make much sense. So their physics says because this is the opposite direction, somehow I can subtract it from this 50 and that makes 0, and then it's really only 100. But clearly a logical person like yourself would be able to know that, no, this is real motion in this direction, this is real motion in that direction, and that shouldn't happen. I can't really have a car crash and create this effect. So I can't crash a light car into a heavy car that's not moving and make the heavy car move a lot, okay, and more momentum than I had when I hit it, and I'm going to reflect also. We know no car crash in the history of mankind happens that way, right? And then worse, this is going to happen, and then these two things are going to come in and meet. All right, they're going to hit each other, swing back, and so then you have this scenario where you have 150. Okay, you have a car going 150 momentum, a heavy car, 3 times this weight, one car going 50 miles an hour, you could argue, and I'm supposed to believe that those two things hit each other and only 100 pops back out. That's all, just the 100. Just this one flies back, and it flies back with the same 100 I started with. Somehow I have 150 velocities here. I have momentum and 50, and somehow I'm going to make just 100 pop out. When the cars hit, that's all it's going to add up to. All the flying pieces. If I add up all the flying pieces, I'm just going to get 100. It doesn't make any sense. That doesn't happen in the real world. Okay? It just doesn't. There's a fact it doesn't happen. So I really shouldn't have to, I shouldn't be able to expect that you have some counter argument for something that's, where I can't find a single reference to any evidence that indicates this ever does happen in the real world. That momentum, you can create more momentum and then you can make the momentum disappear. So until they can show me a car crash where that actually happened, why should I believe it? I'm not being a fool by saying, well, I'm not going to believe it until you can show me that makes sense, that some of you have good reason to believe it. They don't have good reason. Okay, they got bad video of experiments done, where they don't really measure, in any kind of precise ways. So it doesn't make any sense. All right. So I could go on and on, about 10-ton trains and 5-ton trains. I have a 5-mass object. I combine it with another 5-mass object in a very graceful way. I connect these two things, and the velocity here, gets divided between the two objects, so I lose half the velocity. The 10 turns into 2 5s essentially. Okay, and I end up with a 10 mass. Okay, going 5 velocity, which makes perfectly good sense. It all adds up just nice. Momentum says everything's just fine. Their theory is that I have lost half the kinetic energy. That I started with, say, 100 kinetic energy, and now I only have 50 here. And their argument is, if I took this object and I put it on one side of a tug of war, the 10 going 5, and I put it in a tug of war against the 5 going 10 over on the other side, that somehow the 5 going 10 has twice the energy. And that somehow it'll pull, the 10-ton going 5 in its direction. It'll win decisively. It's twice the power, twice the energy, twice the watts, twice the joules, twice the thermal units, twice the whatever you want to use. They say it has some sort of real capacity, and yet we don't have any experiments. We got no evidence that the 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour loses the tug of war. Zero. None. We have no evidence that if those two things crashed into each other, that the crash would do anything other than just do what we've seen in example after example. There are some examples of where they crash a train into another train, right? There's an old 1930s video of two trains crashing into each other, both going the same speed, blah, blah, blah. And all you get is two trains pop up in the air, two trains catch fire, two trains, it all happens right here. It doesn't go anywhere. One train doesn't win. And yes, they're not using the, half the speed, twice the weight scenario. So all we need is the video of the twice as heavy train going half the speed. And let's see what happens when the two of them crash. And they've never done the experiment. They won't even do it with little carts. They won't show us that the light thing going faster has twice the energy, that it's going to smash the other thing and keep going because it has all this extra energy. The reason why a crash stops is because there has to be an equal amount of energy on both sides. If there's supposed to be an unequal amount, then we should see the crash move in the direction of the unequal amount of energy. The thing with more energy should win. Do they have some reason why that doesn't happen? So, it's insulting your intelligence, I would argue, for them to say that they've debunked all of these arguments, they've somehow made some sort of rational argument to counter it. besides just saying the word inertia, what have they done? What have they done to explain any of this? Nothing. And all they've said is we've proven, when they haven't even come close to proving anything. All right, so let's deal with some of these moronic comments. Again, I don't know how they, they make these comments as if they have completed their job, like they have been responsible human beings. They've done their job. They've made cogent, rational counter arguments and explained why I am wrong, when they haven't done any of it. So this guy starts with, do some experiments. I have. So again, but I have made it clear that I'm not in the position to do experiments. I'm not an engineer in terms of, I don't have a machine shop. I can't make parts. I can't do all this kind of stuff. I don't have any way to do anything with any precision. This is the best scale I have. Come on. I hardly have the facilities, to be doing, for curing cancer. Yeah, this isn't the right lab for somebody to do that in. So yes, and I've solicited other people to do it. I've offered fair compensation. Just a fact, I have. So I've done everything I can to encourage somebody who does have the facilities to do it. I've emailed them. I've offered them substantial financial compensation. Where have I dropped the ball in terms of experiments and being completely encouraging that to take place? I've done that. You haven't. There's no evidence you've done any of that, that you've solicited any of these experiments, that you've complained to science about the fact that they haven't done any of them. The scientists have millions of laboratories, all kinds of air carts, all kinds of equipment. Why don't you harp on them about the fact that they've never done any of these fundamental experiments, that they've never shown us that taking 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast, or 9 times the fuel to go 3 times as fast? Why aren't you asking why they have never done any of these experiments? And you're going to tell me you're an honest human being? You can't figure out that they haven't done any of them, and they have tons of money and tons of equipment, and they haven't done any of these foundational experiments, and that's okay with you. And then you're going to rag on me because I don't devote myself to trying to engineer them out of, Play-Doh and balsa wood. Amazing. Okay. You've made hundreds of videos saying, I guess I'll have to do the experiment. Well, I haven't made hundreds saying that. I'm just saying it now, lamenting. I've clearly indicated I don't have the facilities. I don't want to do the experiments. I'm not interested in doing the experiments. I'm not equipped to do the experiments. I prefer somebody qualified and professional did the experiments. I'm willing to pay to have the experiments done. That's not a clear enough statement in my defense. I have to defend myself that that's the wrong approach to take? No, that's exactly the approach I should be taking. All right, or I'll do the experiment at some point. Yeah, I'm just saying that. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's been resolved somehow? Do you think the crappy experiments that you people don't even have enough pride to link to? I tell you, go ahead, link to the proof you have. Well, the proof is pretty shitty, and you can't even admit that? That, yeah, it's not really good enough. It's not the kind of stuff you go to court with. All right. You've been saying this for years, so that's a lie. And yet all we have from you is the same pointless scribbles on the whiteboard. So again, he thinks the arguments of diagramming force, that is, force diagrams, are pointless. Is that the word he used? Yeah, pointless. He scribbles on a board. So diagramming experiments is pointless. Diagramming the physics is pointless. I think that's exactly the point. That's what's called a map. Okay, that's what's called a blueprint. These are all things you do if you're going to engineer something. You draw it first. Amazing. No one cares what feels right. So where's the argument that I'm talking about a feeling here somewhere? That I feel, okay, that momentum is reasonable and kinetic energy isn't. I didn't say Newton had a feeling. I'm not defending Newton's feelings. I'm defending the fact that Newton did a ton of experiments, and he didn't see the mv squared. He didn't see it anywhere. And he directly opposed it. That is, once it was suggested to him that it existed, he still couldn't see it. All right, and he had some 40 years to see it. You know, from the time Leibniz first mentioned it to the 1720s when they were still arguing it. Those are decades that Newton had where Newton could have said, oh yeah, okay, maybe that happens. He didn't say that. He didn't do that. That didn't happen. You're the ones lying, saying he said F equals ma when he didn't say that. Or saying that he said 9.8 meters per second when he didn't say that. You know, second squared. All right, and the burden of proof is on you. Why is it on me? Isn't the burden of proof on anybody stating that they have a truth? Shouldn't every truth have the same burden? Every statement have the same burden? And so you're saying you've satisfied your burden of proof because Leibniz says so? So again, we're going back to Leibniz. He had no physical evidence. He had no experiment. He had no nothing. He just merely claimed, okay, that there's an equality, okay, that somehow one mass dropping 4 distances is somehow the same energy as a 4 mass dropping 1 distance. When if you did that experiment, frankly, I don't see how you could possibly realize the result. Okay, this nonsense that somehow you're going to do the same damage to the ground. All right, let's see. Burden of proof is on you to come up with something, anything to back up your claim. So again, why don't you have to back up yours? So again, you're claiming it takes 4 times the fuel to go twice as fast. Have you backed it up? Have you backed up the claim that it takes 9 times the fuel to go 3 times as fast? Have you backed up the claim that it takes 16 times the fuel to go 4 times as fast? Have you backed up any of that? Where have you done it? Can you post me a link to where you backed any of it up? You lying scum. All right. You don't get to just assert things. How come you do? I mean, the hypocrisy. Again, you're just asserting. You're not proving anything. You're not showing me the evidence. Nothing. But you don't have any. Okay, and say, prove me wrong. Well, that's part of the argument, again, is to say, I've just pointed out, okay, that I believe that 1 mile an hour is the speed you push something at into a scale, and it will read your weight. Okay, that's my conclusion. I did some crude experiments dropping things, okay, and 1 centimeter seems to be the number. 1 centimeter would be free falling gravity from 1 centimeter is 1 mile an hour. So it all sorts of adds up, in my opinion. So just make your counter argument. Point me to some reference you have that disputes that as a truth. Show me that it's wrong. All right. That's not science. I think that's exactly what science is comparing 2 models and then comparing also the integrity of the evidence. You can't just talk about the fact that, well, he had a gun and, you know, he had bullets. Well, no, I don't have any receipts. He doesn't, you know, I'm just saying he has them. And that's all you're doing. And it is an insult that you use the word science. So that's, I would say to you, it's insulting anyone's intelligence. Frankly, anything intelligent on this planet should know that, yes, if science is going to claim it takes 9 times the fuel to go 3 times as fast, frankly, it should do that experiment and prove it. That's a pretty bold claim. 25 times the fuel to go 5 times as fast. That's a pretty bold claim. Maybe they should show us a little bit of evidence to say, yeah, this is true. Here's the experiment. I mean, again, you haven't even repeated the Eddington experiment, 400 times better resolution from space, nothing. And here you are talking about you're a science lover? No, you're a propaganda lover. You're a cult lover. In your channel name, considering you have no respect for the scientific process. So where are you showing respect for it? Where? I mean, I've reduced the arguments to 5-minute videos, made them as simple as possible, and I've essentially pleading with you to show where I drew something incorrect, where I made a statement that isn't true about Leibniz or de Châtelet, or about the history of this theory, and about the state of the evidence. Show me where I lied or deceived or had something wrong by just mere error. Show me the errors I have made in my models and descriptions. But you won't do that. And you're saying you give a shit about the scientific process? No, you give a shit about defending a religion. All right, you dismiss every experiment. No, it's not. I don't dismiss any of them. I watch them, I look at them, and then I say why I think they're flawed. It seems a reasonable thing to do, just as if I did the experiment, somebody can point out how mine are flawed. They could say, well, the video sucks, and I'll agree with them. Okay, I say it's not good enough, and I'll say, I agree. I didn't call it a proof, did I? I didn't just title my video proof. I titled it something like, well, here's an experiment I did. You know, and that's all it is. It's an indicator. It's not a proof. So if it wasn't for the fact that none of these people can post this crap in the context of the fact that there is a burden here to understand there are variables. Now, the absolute fact is that my critiques are true. I mean, it is a fact that Ian Gosling's moronic first clay experiment, you know, where he crushed the clay from the wrong distances, it would have been left up as a proof and would have been pristine or something, like it was a real experiment, if I didn't point out, okay, that it was completely wrong measurements, right? So if nobody points out the flaws, then yeah, they just pretend it's a good experiment when it has something in it that's clearly stupid. Now, it's an absolute fact that Disbar's experiments got only better because I kept pointing out what were pretty obvious flaws in them. The launching mechanism, the spring thing was pretty crappy. The rubber bands were much better. The quick release argument, then the quick release made things much better. It's facts that these things get better. Now, Ian Gosling's own experiment went from, you know, when he did the clay experiment the first time, he got no difference in the crushing of the clay. And all of a sudden, the new experiment, he's gotten his 1.4 number. Well, how do you explain that? How do you explain the fact that their own experiments change because of making modifications to them? And then you're going to complain because somebody points out how a modification might have broken it rather than fixed it? I mean, you're such hypocrites. All right, Stephen Ian, and let's see what else he says here. Everyone else has done for ridiculous reasons. So again, their ridiculous reasons is, I guess, they don't have any curiosity either. And the fact is, they can't just link to the proof already done on the internet. The very fact that we cannot link to these lever experiments, to any of these experiments, can't just link to them on the internet. And the one experiment that is on the internet, you know, the Professor Lewin one, is still veiled in some suspicion. Because every one of those experiments, there's always something. I mean, they're doing these weird mass ratios. You know, there's stupid rotten camera angles, all kinds of bullshit in every one of those. And that doesn't make you a little uneasy? That we don't have a really clear, decisive piece of evidence? The very fact that the Professor Lewin video has these obvious defect of having these blobs of clay on the air carts, you can't concede that the experiment probably shouldn't look that way? Amazing. All right, absolutely nothing yourself. Let's see, done for ridiculous reasons and do absolutely nothing yourself. So again, I have done stuff myself, but again, I made an air track, frankly, a different kind, a version of one, and found out real flaws in air tracks. So you don't think it's a real physical fact that when I explained, okay, so you just really, you're so anti-science that if somebody points out something that's just obviously a fact, it's a truth, that, you know, there is a fundamental flaw in air track technology. All right, and you know, it's like nobody talks about it, nobody's mentioned it, but I mean, it's a fundamental flaw because you're paying a pretty high price for the frictionless environment. So, you know, the basic design is that, you know, you have this triangle, you pump air into it, you know, and the idea is you got a bunch of holes and you're blowing air, okay, up the holes, and you have these little carts that can float on the air. And, you know, besides the fact that they wobble and do lots of other things, right, it should occur to you that there's a real flaw in the sense that you're adding energy to this system. So you're paying a price for this friction, you know, for the lack of friction. And that is that whatever's happening in here, you are adding energy in the system. You're pumping it up full of energy, and you have a bunch of energy flying out of this system. And the fact is that all this cart has to do is tilt one way or tilt the other way, and even an idiot like you could sort of understand that if the cart tilts and rises above the track at all, that a bunch of air is going to escape. Because this is all air pressure. It's enough air pressure to lift the piece of aluminum. It's not a minor thing you're lifting. You're lifting real weight, maybe 200 grams. You're lifting it. All right, so it's pretty good air pressure that's pushing the cart up and keeping it from hitting the track. And you can just understand that, yeah, all it has to do is lift up enough where it starts oscillating or does something else. That's what I found it did. It just oscillated. You know, it would bounce around, okay, because the air would come out this side, and then the air would shoot out this side, and then the air would shoot, you know, it just keep going back and forth, and air, blah, blah, blah. But you can understand that when the two carts hit each other, that, you know, if depending on where you put the impact point, you could end up, you know, pushing a cart where you push it up, and now it's going to go push into you, or you could push it where you pop up the back end, okay, and now you've given it extra velocity. So I can create a basically little rocket engine, you know, by hitting the cart. So you're paying a price for this frictionless environment. It's not free and it's not perfect. And unless these carts are very stable and well balanced, and you think about all these variables, unless you've considered them, you could have a lot of trouble. Now Brozo had a problem because, yeah, his, you know, he was using very thin aluminum, and his carts were a little bit too light, you know, and they would, you know, you get them to float, and once you get them to float, they're flopping around. And it's a real problem. All right, I used a cylinder, okay, and, you know, so the idea is the air would obviously push against the part that was gravity was pushing down on, so it wasn't going to be a problem. But yeah, you really can't control how that air flows, and so things, it pushes this way, it pushes that way, and it just creates a bunch of wobble. These aren't real arguments. This isn't something that a scientist should consider. Nobody should even bring it up. Nobody should talk about it. Nobody should examine it. They should just be dupes like you and just say yes to everything they say happens and is real. And nobody should examine the experiment and say, well, isn't that kind of a nonsense? I mean, you know, the LIGO people tell you that they can bounce light off of a mirror, okay, so perfectly. A mirror that's, you know, a foot thick, by the way. And they can guarantee that the photon only went 2 or 3 atoms into the mirror. You know, that's their assurance. Do you think that's really true, that you can make a 1 foot thick mirror and you're just going to reflect things off the surface? You fall for that, huh? Okay. And you know, I mean, you're such a corrupt, horrid piece of crap to say there's anything dishonest or unworthy in me dissecting the fact that, yeah, the air track does have a flaw. It just happens to be a fact. It's a real variable. It's got to be controlled or your experiment might be corrupted. These are facts. Okay. All right. this is textbook crank behavior. So I don't know, is there a textbook on crank behavior, whatever that is? So, and I would just argue that you are being quite representative, a poster child for cult fanatic. That your behavior just indicates that, yes, you've been told by daddy or mommy what to think, some sort of mommy figure, and you're all butthurt if somebody suggests that your mommy isn't right. Okay. Instead of making another 500 videos, I'll make 5,000 more. I'm not going to stop because you're too stupid to understand. Okay, that's not going to happen. So, I mean, you could just make this into lots of arguments. I mean, if you really believe something, okay, let's say you believe that, let's just say platypuses feel, and that you can hurt a platypus. And there's aliens coming down to Earth, and they're killing the platypuses and stepping on them and killing them in brutal, horrible ways. And you decide to argue it. Do you think you're just going to give up? Because the aliens aren't paying any attention to your argument. You're just going to say, forget it, I'm not going to bother anymore? Is that how much it matters to you? So I'm saying the truth matters to me. Okay? I have a great passion for getting it right. It's the game I'm playing. All right? So I'm doing this in a competitive way, you could argue. I'm playing a competitive game of chess or something, and for me the game is truth. All right? And I'm not going to quit or give up just because you're too stupid to understand. Okay. Where all you do is insult people. Well, that's not true. 95% of the content is me doing what I just did, explaining something, and doing the best I can to explain how the physics works, how the mechanism works, why certain things happen, and I'm trying to detail every little bit of it that you need to know to understand why I see a problem. That's what 95% of my videos are. The insults come from you. And they're just my reaction to your insults is, well, fuck you too. Of course, that's what you're going to get back. You insult me, I'm just going to insult you. Alright, get off your lazy backside and do an experiment. So it's just an absolute fact that I did do these experiments. Alright, I did the coupled oscillator first. I did all this stuff. So let's not pretend I don't or didn't. I don't have an interest. But again, I'm still going to argue I don't have the space, I don't have the hardware, I don't have the equipment, I don't have either the time either. It's not what I want to spend my time doing. Alright, or shut the hell up. I don't have to shut the hell up. You're the ones that have provided no evidence and no counter arguments. You're the one who should shut the fuck up until you can respond to the arguments that have been made. So respond. Explain how the air cart isn't flawed because it's providing an alternative energy source. How that isn't good reason to be a little bit suspicious. That there'd be good reason to be wondering whether, well, have they really ensured that that extra energy isn't being unevenly distributed? Alright. It's not like you have anything else to do with your time. So again, who are you to say? I have lots of other interests. I have other skills. I really would prefer to be painting and doing other things. I do enjoy them more. But I know this is more important. Alright. And I guess I would argue to some extent. I'm an okay painter, but I'm not going to do anything earth-shattering. And clearly here, I think I can shatter some things. This is a medium where I'm more needed. Let me just put it that way. All right. So this is a live, comment by Farley, just this fake account, fake person doing fake shit. So, just more blows to the credibility of all of this conversation that these people do. They just have these fake conversations with fake characters, all this just fake bullshit. All right, as an observer, I declare draft science the winner, blah, 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 blah. So, doesn't, a meaningless statement, fine. While the rest of the world shakes its head and chuckles and ignores him. So we know the rest of the world isn't even involved in the conversation, okay, doesn't even know it exists, that it's really just me against a few minor players, and we know the few physicists that show up run away. Okay, plain and simple. They don't win any argument against me. They don't prove anything or demonstrate with any kind of integrity. They just cowardly run away. Happened over and over and over again. I asked for the opportunity to prove my point, to have the point well argued, and they won't. I put the argument again, 5-minute videos for this very purpose, because somehow their attention span and their time is so important that they can't listen to more than 5 minutes. And they still won't argue the argument. All right. He's got the attention he desperately craves. So again, more nonsense rhetoric. It's not about attention for the sake of it. There's absolutely no indication I have any interest in an audience, that I have interaction with people, that I give a shit about any kind of praise or any of that horseshit. Absolutely zero evidence that any of that interests me in the least. And there's all kinds of evidence that I'm keenly interested in people making arguments where they actually diagram and explain. Okay. So it's just these lies, these pathetic lies. All right, he's got his word salad elevated to a legitimate physics argument. And in what way has it been elevated to anything? This is the whole part that's so disgusting. The fact is, this stupid truth, this stupid fable of 1/2 mv squared, that just started off with just mv squared, for 300 years it's been a blight on the intelligence of mankind. It's just insulting your own intelligence. And the whole reason it stays that way is because of you kind of people. You're obnoxious to the truth being found. You don't want the trial to take place because you know your client's guilty. And you're just doing everything you can to avoid the trial. Avoid the evidence actually being examined. Avoid them actually testing to see if it does take 16 times the fuel to go 4 times as fast. I just amazing bullshit from these people. He's got people to do his experiments for him in ways that are always flawed and just even little things. Like, again, they can't be... it was so easy. I just did it today to make a quick release for dropping the weight. You just put a hook on one side and a hook on the other side, put a little piece of string between the two, and you cut it. It's just so easy to do, and they won't do it. Yeah, it's just such bullshit. While he sits on his ass in judgment. I sit on my ass saying you should be in the same judgment. You should be saying the same thing. We can't expect better than this. Denting clay with round things. What next? There was an experiment where they bashed a car into a frickin' soda cracker. Is that what you want the foundation of physics to be based on? Is pushing matchbook cars into soda crackers? That's it? You don't really have any higher expectations for what the evidence is going to look like in this trial? Oh, fuck. You're so dishonest, because of course you wish there was better evidence. Of course you wish there was a big pile of really great evidence that you could link to. And you're just lying, pretending that, well, okay, I don't care if the evidence doesn't exist. Because you're a fanatic. Okay, you're not a rational, reasonable player in this argument. You're not a juror. You're an aggressive defendant. You're the defendant's mother. You know, you're just pretending that your little psycho monster kid is somehow, he didn't mean to do it. You know, some sort of bullshit. Alright, the results of any experiment will have zero relevance. So, again, more lies. Alright, because he will continue making videos claiming that no one has provided a counter argument. Well, they haven't provided. Where's the counter argument? Please, explain it to me where somebody provided a counter argument to my argument about the dropping round things into clay, denting clay with round things. Where's the counter argument? Where did somebody counter argue my statement that Newton said 9.8 meters per 1 second? Where was the counter argument to that? It was provided somewhere. Where was the counter argument to my statement that Newton opposed mv squared? He wasn't in favor of it. It wasn't his physics. He opposed it directly. Where's the counter argument? He never would have said F equals ma, so to speak. He didn't. And he certainly wouldn't say it if you're going to pretend that the a means you square the velocity. Okay. Counter argument or evidence. And of course they haven't. He wins hands down, whatever that means. Very entertaining, LOL. So again, this is how they defend this insult to all human intelligence, is to pretend this is a video game. Oh, it's just it's for the lulz, LOL. It doesn't mean anything. The truth doesn't really matter. Fuck, who cares about science anyway? Yeah. I mean, they're not here because they care about the truth. Oh, damn. Alright, so Gosling chimes in for absolutely no good reason. Alright. Winning in the sense of self-delusion. So again, where am I deluded? Because I don't believe what he believes. Okay, so let's just do a Gosling belief. And he's going to say, I'm deluded because I can't possibly understand what the fuck he's talking about. Alright, how it has anything to do with reality. Alright, so I'm going to do something simple. I have a scale, and I'm going to put a weight on it, alright? So I take this thing that has a known mass, one mass, and I put it on the scale, okay? And the scale goes down, weighing the mass, okay? Telling us how much the mass weighs. And it's his argument that when I take exactly the same mass and do this a second time, okay, that somehow, when I put this one on the scale, and now the mass reads 2, it really has 4 times the energy. So it only has 1 unit of energy when I put the one mass on, right? So one mass goes on, it's only 1 energy. But when I put this second one on, all of a sudden now, it's 3 energies. So somehow it's the same mass, lifted the same amount, put on the same scale, and somehow this one made 3 energies worth of compression. This one only made 1, this one made 3. I mean, that's his argument. You can make sense out of that? I can't make any sense out of that. Okay, yeah, you can see this. I didn't have the comments up, which you don't need anyway. So he's calling me delusional. I'm self-delusional because I don't know how the fuck he can believe that. How he can possibly think that this 1 unit of energy, okay, put in here, and this 1 unit of energy put in here can equal 4. I can't see it. I can't understand it. I can't make any sense of it all. And that means I'm delusional because I can't understand his logic at all. The magical, 30-pound, 10-pound weight. The 10-pound weight somehow weighs 30 pounds now. It's magical. Alright, anyway, let's see where we were. Interesting, he describes in others the very thing he himself suffers with. So I don't know what that is. I clearly am not dishonest. I'm saying overtly, right to your face, that you are insanely dishonest people. Grotesque. It's obnoxious for you not to admit that Newton did not believe what you believe. for you not to say it overtly and clearly that no, you don't think they should be calling this Newton's physics, because it isn't Newton's physics. It's a clear historical fact. It is not Newton's physics. I'm not sitting here lying about who people are. You are. Okay, you're putting lies in people's fucking mouths and pretending that this has credibility it doesn't have. Newton opposed it. Descartes would have opposed it. Galileo would have opposed it. Okay? It's not their physics. All right. In his latest, he says, us, the collective others, have suffered a psychological condition that disables our ability not to be fooled. Yeah, I didn't say it exactly that way, but yeah, that's all it can be described as, right? I mean, you're clearly dupes. You're clearly fans, all right? And I can't explain why you're defending obscene behavior. I mean, it's like it's like when, they found out some baseball players were basically rapists and shit, and the fans just defend it. They just don't care. And that's what you are. You're just one of these fans who won't accept any responsibility for the fact that your guys dropped the ball, that they cheated in the big game. You've cheated the argument. You do understand that, Eddington said right in his own journal, I would not stake my life on these results. Now, do you think there should have been a New York Times headline saying Einstein proven right, when the guy who did the experiment said, shit, my results are going to suck because I only got 10% of the data? You don't think that's dishonest? You won't admit that that's dishonest? That your science shouldn't be founded on that kind of dishonesty? And that's all you have? The very fact that you won't admit it seems preposterous, almost ludicrous, that you can't show me a video of it taking 9 times the fuel to go 3 times as fast. You should be able to admit that in 2003, it's quite ludicrous that you can't show me the proof, that nobody's ever done the experiment. In the history of physics, no one has recorded an experiment where they revealed the truth that it takes 9 times the fuel to go 3 times as fast. You won't admit that that's nonsensical, that it just really is kind of crazy and silly, that your science has been so unscientific in providing evidence for its theories, that it's claiming things with so little credible evidence, and you won't admit that. And that kind of dishonesty, you say, where does that kind of dishonesty come from? The fact that you won't admit that you're sitting here with real deficits in the evidence you should have. Hundreds of years, millions of scientists, billions of dollars, and you haven't shored up any of these accusations with real proof. Again, not doing the Eddington experiment from space. 400 times better viewing resolution from space. 400 times. You don't need a big giant telescope. You don't need an eclipse. All you need is 5 minutes with a decent camera, and you can redo the experiment with better precision. And it's never even been attempted. Only a preposterous liar would defend that as science. Oh, the scientists just didn't bother. An experiment that's never been successfully repeated was the foundation for the whole credibility of Einstein as a scientist. And you think it's okay that they never even bothered doing this critically important experiment, in the sense that it actually provides hard data. It doesn't provide mushy data. It provides hard data that gravity is doing the bending. There's no ambiguity. You do the experiment right, you can't blame it on dust or dirt or something else, because it's an image being distorted. It's a critical experiment. And here you are just pretending it's just, oh, that's just nothing. That doesn't mean anything. It's still really credible science, even though they never did. This is like not doing the DNA test, and not putting the fingerprint in the computer, and not doing the taking the saliva, not doing this. This is the worst kind of horrid police work, detective work. And that's what science is supposed to be, really, disciplined, every detail. They should be doing everything they can to make sure they got it all right. Not do everything they can to make sure they have no reason to have it right. I mean, you are such, and he sits there and says, he is the chief hypocrite. This coming from a guy who won't admit any of these flaws. Concede any of this, the fact that it's perfectly reasonable for there to be dissenters against this fucking noise scientists make. This fucking goddamn gibberish about their entangled particles and all of this nonsense. And the only reason why he's defending it is because he believes in it. He wants that crap to be true. Ugh, pathetic. And Falwell says, like yourself, us lot who performed the odd experiment, and yes, they were odd, frankly. Okay, find his reaction entertaining. See, again, he's just here for the lulz. We know it makes no difference. You don't think it makes a difference. I mean, you have physicist Michael actually participating in the conversation, and you buffoons don't do anything to upgrade the level of that conversation. Paul, mostly because you don't know any physics. But it's funny to see him squirm. And again, squirm where? Squirm by demonstrating over and over again how, gee, you see how they just can't be honest? I mean, Gosling does an experiment, right? I mean, Leibniz said, drop something from 4 times the height, 4 times the distance. We know that goes twice as fast. He does an experiment where something's going 4 times as fast and says, there, isn't that the same thing? Isn't going twice as fast and going 4 times as fast exactly the same thing? I mean, how could anybody think that twice as fast and 4 times as fast are different? I mean, that's exactly the same, isn't it? What's the difference? Just like 4 ounces is the same as 5 ounces, right? Same difference. I mean, you people are pathetic. All right. We know it makes no difference, but it's funny to see him squirm and come up with his wild excuses. So again, what are your excuses? You won't even come up with any. You won't even respond to a single one of these arguments. Not a single one. You won't explain why the Eddington experiment hasn't been done from space, a perfectly sensible thing for science to do. Huge advantage. Okay? You won't explain it. Okay. We add to the entertainment factor you enjoy. I don't know. See, so they're just, again, these people don't care about the truth. This is all just some sort of silly little game for them. This is a little internet game. Stick your finger in your butthole. They're just pathetic. Ugh, it's disgusting. It's such an insult. You'd think there'd be somebody watching these videos who gives a shit about physics, actually gives a shit about engineering things and getting it right, and would, say, would you just quit with that nonsense, fucktard? I mean, could you stay on the subject? Could you make a rational argument? Damn. All right. So, I think that's enough of a video. Yeah, so it's an hour's worth. That's enough. All right. I just wanted to make those counter arguments. Again, this is all the psychobabble bullshit about motives and intent and all this crap, and it's just so dishonest of these people not to recognize why somebody would dissent. I mean, they're basically selling a theory that we should be throwing virgins into volcanoes and it somehow works. It keeps the crops greener. And I'm just standing up to say, why the fuck are we doing that? Why the fuck does that make sense to you? I'm not the guy who should be shot. I'm not the one who's suggesting the dumb idea. I'm suggesting the mechanically simple idea where most of the evidence points. And again, their own counter argument. He did his little fake experiment, and what did he do? He just proved again that, the momentums were equal. So when he drops the small object 4 times the distance going 4 times the velocity, what did he do? He created 2 things with equal momentum. That's what he did. Stupid fuck.